Alright, so this is part 2 of problem number 2, where we're going to find the domain and range of the inverse function. So in the last part of the problem we actually found the inverse function of this function, and now we're going to find the domain and range of that. And the basic technique, I think the easiest way to do this is to use the fact that the domain of the original function will be the range of its inverse, and vice versa. Because it's usually easier to find the domain of a function than it is to find the range. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the domain of G, and then that will be the range of G inverse. And then we're going to, so that'll give us the range, and then to find the range, to find the domain of G inverse, we're just going to find that directly. Okay. So I'm going to find the domain of G and switch that to be the range, and then I'm just going to find the domain of G inverse directly, and then I'll have both domain and range. Okay. All right. So first, let's talk about what's the domain of the original function G. So going back to that function, remember that here it is up here. And what kind of function is g of x? Well, g of x is just an exponential function. All right? And so we actually don't really need to dive any deeper into the nature of the function. If you know that it's an exponential function and there's nothing funny going on in the exponent that would cause you any additional problems. So here the exponent is just 2 minus x, so it's just there's no fraction or anything like that to worry about. But the point is that if it's just a simple exponential function like this, then the domain is all real numbers. So exponential functions always have all real number domains unless there's some kind of transformation that has changed that. Okay. So exponential functions, domain, all real numbers. That's negative infinity to positive infinity. And so therefore that is the range of G inverse. So G inverse has range negative infinity to positive infinity. Okay. So that takes care of the range. Now let's find the domain of G inverse. And so to do that, or to find that, I'm going to go directly to the inverse function, which is right here. And so the G inverse function is a natural log or logarithmic function, right? And the only place where we have a variable is right here. And the only thing we have to worry about is that we cannot have the argument of any of these log expressions be 0 or less than 0. So they have to be greater than 0. And since the only place where that could possibly happen is right here, x plus 3, all we have to do is just make sure that that doesn't happen. And so we need to solve this inequality, which says x must be greater than negative 3. And that's going to be my domain. So my domain of G inverse is going to be parentheses, because we can't have negative 3. Negative 3 is not included, so it's not a bracket, it's parentheses, negative 3 up to infinity. And that's the domain of the inverse function, and that's the range of the inverse function.